Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this chess Blitz postmortem video. This is a postmortem of my Blitz game number 18, where we got into the Steinitz variation of the French defense. So let's take a look at how that happened. And this video features a little bit of an excursion into the opening. One of the sidelines is pretty interesting, and features a tactical quiz. So I'm going to keep the engine turned off and keep your tactical sensors on. So I start off by playing d4, and my opponent played e6. So that's not the most usual move, but still played fairly often. And this is a way to transpose into other lines than the main queen's pawn opening lines. And one way this can happen is if I play e4, the most common move, then he can transpose into the French defense. If I want to keep it in queen's pawn lines, I can play c4, but I chose e4. I can play against the French defense. Then I go knight c3. The knight d2 move here is a trash, and the e5 move is the advanced variation. Knight c3 allows couple ideas. One is bishop b4, the 1 hour variation, or knight f6, which is more common these days, and that's the classical line. And I used to play bishop g5 here, but I've been experimenting lately with e5, and this is called the Steinitz variation. So here we are. It's a little bit forcing for a few moves. The knight has to retreat, and then it's important for white to play the move f4 here, because the center is going to come under attack, and you want to get the f-pawn up to the f4 square before you develop the knight, because otherwise the knight on f3 is going to be blocking that pawn. So that's what happens. Knight comes to f3 to defend. Black puts more pressure on the center. White defends again. And then now he takes. But the line I wanted to show you, which is an interesting piece sack line, starts with queen b6. So let's just take a look at this variation quickly. So queen b6 is kind of a double attack. It's adding pressure here, although it's not really threatening to take there, but it's also attacking the b-pawn, which is undefended. So naturally enough, white defends with the knight and simultaneously attacks the queen and attacks this pawn. So if white doesn't have something good here, then black can just grab this pawn and will be in pretty good shape. I mean, white can grab that pawn, but black does have a good reply, which is queen a5 check. And so the king is in check, and the pawn is undefended here. So there's a double attack. But there's a way to defend, and you play c3. That blocks the check, and the queen defends the knight through that open c2 square, which got opened up when you played c3. So now the way the piece sack line goes is black plays c takes d4 here. And what's important about this line to know if you're white is that it's not good to take the pawn here, and I'll show you why. For one thing, you have to notice that this pawn is pinned, so you can't take back with a pawn. And another problem is that this knight has no retreat squares. So all these squares are covered, and so if that knight were attacked, it would have nowhere to go. And so black has this threat of playing b5 and just winning that knight. So you take the pawn with the knight to try and hold back b5, but he can exchange it off. And you can't take with the pawn, it's still pinned, so you have to take with the bishop. And now he can play b5, and this knight just has nowhere to go. So this is good for black. Actually, white can play on by playing knight c5 and then threatening to play b4. But black gets an advantage here, so you don't want to play like that. So if we wind back to this point here where black has just taken a pawn, instead of recapturing the pawn immediately, what you do is you play b4, attacking the queen. And notice the knight is still defended, so the queen and the queen can't go to this square to keep pressure on the knight. The queen, this square is covered by the bishop, so the queen would have to retreat here. And then you could move the knight to this c5 square. Actually, you would probably just grab the pawn here next, and white would be in good shape. So what black does in this case, instead of retreating the queen, is he plays knight takes b4. So he just sacrifices the knight, but he gets a lot of play. And he also gets 3 pawns, because remember, he took 1 pawn here, and now he just won 2 more. So he's got 3 pawns for the piece. And white is in check, and the bishop is still under attack, because his pawn has been attacking the bishop the whole time. But white unwinds by retreating the bishop, and then after bishop takes, plays knight takes. And the game continues from here. There's different moves that black can play at this point. But you get the general idea. Black got 3 pawns for the piece, and he has ideas of undermining the center later, and so sometimes he gets 4 pawns, and this armada of pawns in the center from black gives him quite strong compensation for the piece. And white's idea is to find a way to hold back these pawns, and then eventually his extra piece will pay off and allow him to win some material. So it's a balanced game. Both sides can play for a win here, but it's an interesting way to play. I just wanted to show that to you so you were aware of that possibility. We went down a different line. So in this position we get bishop e3, c takes d4, right? So that's what my opponent chose to play, was c takes d4. So now it's safe to take back. There's none of this funny stuff going on with pins and things. And the most common move here is bishop c5, just continuing to put pressure on the center, but my opponent chose bishop e7. And that's an okay move, it looks like. Here, let's just go back to the notation tab. Sorry. Yeah, bishop e7. So looks like queen f3 is the only line in the opening book, and I didn't play it. So let's go back to the notation tab. And I'm going to leave the engine off because there's a tactical quiz coming up. But I'll point out some of the input from the computer that I got when I looked at it earlier. So just developing normally, the computer likes white's position here. It thinks actually that after f5 I shouldn't take, I should just castle and then attack on the king side by playing a move like g4 here, trying to undermine black center. So, but it thought this was okay too, and white continues with some sort of opening, normal opening advantage until we get to this move here. And yeah, I was at a loss for a plan for some reason in the game. But there's actually a couple of good moves here other than the one I played. And the main ideas would be to play the bishop to the g4 square where it attacks the pawn here. And the other idea is just to play, let's erase those lines. The other idea is just to play f4 and undermine directly. And notice that the knight is attacking this d pawn, and if this pawn comes forward, it's not even defended. So actually, I was completely oblivious to that during the game. This f4 to f5 idea is pretty strong, and I just missed that. So instead, I came up with this slow plan of trying to rearrange my pieces. And the dangerous thing about slow plans is that it gives your opponent time to make some moves. And so now he's threatening my queen, and he's getting some tempos. And looking back, I might have been better off just taking that knight because it caused me trouble. But I'm still okay at this point. It's here and the next move, the next 2 moves, where my position seriously goes downhill. So again, the best idea here is to play f4 to f5 and then take the d pawn here, which is going to be hanging after that. But instead I played queen d2, protecting my c pawn so my knight can move, and then I moved my knight away. So that was all part of the same plan. It's just that it was a bad plan because by moving my knight away, I've taken pressure off the center. Now this f5 move is no longer so strong, and black gets this great outpost for his knight. So black has the advantage, and he keeps it for pretty much the rest of the game. Yeah, I think he keeps the advantage for the rest of the game. So we're going to go on for a few moves, and the knight maneuvers, and I keep trying to chase it away, and it keeps finding good squares. Let's back up here. I just wanted to point out, yeah, when he plays this move, Queen A7 check, this is a very forcing move, and if I move my king away, he's got this knight check here, which forks my king and my queen, so I'd have to give up the exchange. So I was actually lucky during the game to find this move, Queen D4, which blocks that. So I'm holding on. Black has an advantage, but it's not an overwhelming advantage just yet. But the point where it becomes an overwhelming advantage is coming up shortly. Right here, I play the move Knight D4, and here's your tactical quiz. Black can end the game right here. So why don't you take a minute to think about it and say, what would you play as black? Okay, if you haven't seen it yet, I'm going to tell you the answer, so pause the video if you want to think about it some more. This is definitely something you should probably try and think about until you solve it. It's a good one and not too hard to see. Okay, I'm going to tell you the answer now. The right way for black to win is to play this move, knight to G3, check. And this is, I call this the can opener. This pries open a line. It forces a line to be opened to my king, because my king has no moves. It's surrounded by his own pieces. So the king cannot move at all. And you can't interpose against a knight check, so you're forced to take it. So taking the knight is the only legal move. And then the simple move, rook h6, delivering a check, and the king can't escape. The only piece that can block is the bishop, and the rook can take that, and that's checkmate. So that's really game over. Now my opponent missed that, but you know, I was trying so hard to get rid of that knight, which is causing me no end of threats, that this is a bad move for a second reason, which is he can take it. I finally get rid of that knight, but I lose a pawn, and the game just goes downhill from here. Now black has a winning advantage. My best way to hold this position is actually to play rook to d1, and then if he takes the d pawn, I can pin his rook. So that's a way of indirectly defending the d pawn. I tried instead to go after the e pawn. I was thinking I could double up my rooks, but that allows him to grab a second pawn, and I never managed to get anything against the backwards e pawn there. So this was a clever tactic that my opponent discovered here, taking advantage of my back rank weakness. So I grab a pawn, I'm attacking his rook, but he grabs my rook, and now if I take the queen, then his rook comes down and it's checkmate. And it's a little unfortunate, the placement of my pieces. They're not coordinated. The queen guards that square, the bishop guards that square, and the rook from here would be guarding this square, but none of them coordinate, so there's no way I can block. If he comes here with check, I can interpose three different pieces, but the rook can just gobble them all up. So I get out of this problem by taking his rook with check. He has to take back, and then I can take his queen. And so I managed to keep the pieces in balance, but he still has these two advanced pawns in the center, which are still protected. I still managed to undermine them, and he manages to bring them home to victory. And I didn't really want to trade rooks, but he wasn't leaving me much choice there. And he plays this part very well. He advances slowly and cautiously, bringing his king in, and making sure that I don't have any tricks. So the one trick I was trying for here is I was hoping he might try and move his king forward to this square, in which case I can take the pawn with check and pick up his bishop. But he didn't fall for that. And I try to hold the pawns at bay, but eventually he manages to break through. Basically, he runs me out of moves. My bishop is now tied up, having to defend the pawn. My king is confined to this square because he wants to stay in front of these two pawns that are going to queen. And so I just don't have a good move here. So good game, and interesting little tactic there, and an interesting opening. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you have any comments, leave them in the section below, and I'll see you next time. Bye.